The smell of burnt paper is something you don't forget. It doesn't just stay in the air, it crawls into your throat, scratches your lungs, and lingers there like something alive. I stood frozen in the doorway leading to the backyard, my fingers still wrapped tightly around my phone, my breath caught somewhere between a scream and silence. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. There was a metal drum in the middle of the yard, the kind we used for old trash. Flames flickered inside it, hungry and careless, licking at the edges of something white that curled and blackened as it disappeared. Sheets of paper twisted in the heat, edges glowing orange before collapsing into ash. My papers, my applications. For a second, I convinced myself it couldn't be. That maybe it was old bills or newspapers or something unimportant. But then I saw it, my name, half burned but still visible, ink dissolving into smoke. My chest tightened so suddenly it hurt. No. The word slipped out before I could stop it, barely more than a breath. My mother stood beside the drum, arms folded neatly across her chest as if she were watching something ordinary, something routine. Her face was calm, too calm. Not angry, not guilty. Just decided. Like this had already been settled. Behind her, Samir leaned against the wall, his hands shoved into his pockets. His head was slightly lowered, his gaze somewhere near the ground. He looked uncomfortable, but he didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't say a word. The fire crackled again, louder this time, as another page collapsed inward. Something snapped inside me. I took a step forward, then another, my heart beat loud in my ears. "What are you doing?" My voice sounded strange, like it didn't belong to me. Too thin, too fragile. My mother finally turned her head, meeting my eyes. There was no hesitation there, no flicker of doubt. "It's done," she said simply. Done. The word echoed in my head, hollow and final. I stared at her, waiting, hoping for something else. An explanation. Regret. Anything that would make this make sense. Nothing came. Why? My voice broke this time, louder now, rising despite my effort to control it. "Why would you do this?" Before she could answer, my father stepped out from the back door, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. His expression was already set, the familiar hardness settling over his features like armor. "Because we had to make a decision," he said. "A decision." I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. It sounded sharp, almost bitter. "A decision? About my applications? About my future? About this family?" he corrected, his tone firm, unyielding. "We can't afford to send both of you. Something had to be prioritized." I stared at him, the words taking a moment to land. "So you decided to just burn mine. You were going to waste time arguing." My mother cut in. "This way it's settled." My hands clenched at my sides. "Settled. You think destroying my work settles anything?" Samir shifted slightly, like he wanted to say something, but the moment passed. He stayed silent. "Samir has better prospects," my father continued, as if he were explaining something obvious. "He needs the investment." The disbelief turned into something hotter now, anger, sharp and rising. Better prospects. My grades are higher. My test scores are better. I got into more programs than he did? That's not the point, my mother said, her voice calm but cutting. Then what is the point? I demanded. She looked at me like the answer should have been obvious all along. He's a boy. The words landed heavier than anything else. He'll carry the family name, she continued. He has responsibilities. You. She paused, her gaze flicking over me briefly. You'll get married eventually. Your husband will take care of you. This is just practical. Practical. The fire crackled again, swallowing another piece of my future. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the world, leaving only that word echoing in the emptiness. Practical. All those late nights. All the times I stayed up rewriting essays, perfecting sentences, chasing something bigger than the life I'd been told to accept. All of it reduced to ash because it wasn't practical. You didn't even tell me, I said finally, my voice quieter now but steadier. You didn't even give me a chance to fight for it. What was there to tell? My mother replied. You would have argued. You always do. Because it's my life. And we're your parents. My father snapped, his voice rising for the first time. We know what's best for you. The certainty in his tone hit harder than the words themselves. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something they regretted. This was a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice to take something from me because they believed I didn't deserve it. I looked at the fire again, watching as the last recognizable piece of paper crumbled into nothing. The flames danced for a moment longer, then settled, leaving behind only glowing embers and gray ash. That was it. That was everything. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. There was no explosion of emotion, no sudden outburst. Just a quiet, irreversible change. Like a door closing somewhere deep inside my chest. I felt it in the way my shoulders straightened. In the way my breathing steadied. In the way the anger didn't disappear, but transformed into something colder, clearer, final. I turned back to them, really looking this time. My mother, still composed, still convinced she'd done the right thing. My father, standing firm in his decision, expecting me to accept it like I always had. Samir, silent, caught somewhere between guilt and relief, but ultimately choosing neither. For the first time, I saw them exactly as they were. Not protectors. Not guides. Just people who had decided I was less. Fine, I said. The word surprised even me. It came out calm, almost too calm. My mother frowned slightly. What? Fine, I repeated, my voice steady now. You've made your decision. My father nodded once, as if that settled everything. Good. Then you understand. I held his gaze for a second longer, then shook my head. No, I said quietly. You don't. They didn't ask what I meant. They didn't think they needed to, but I did. Because in that moment, standing in front of the ashes of everything I had worked for, I realized something they hadn't expected. They thought they had taken my future away. They thought burning those papers would end something. They were wrong. All they had really done was show me exactly who they were, and exactly what I needed to do next. Leaving wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting match, no slammed doors, no desperate attempt to make them understand. That part of me, the part that used to explain, to argue, to beg to be seen, had already burned away with the papers. The house was quiet that night. Too quiet. Like nothing had happened. Like something hadn't just been taken from me in the most deliberate way possible. I moved through my room slowly, pulling open drawers, folding clothes with mechanical precision. A few shirts, jeans, my warmest sweater. I didn't take much. Just enough to fit into an old duffel bag I'd used for school trips. The zipper made a soft, final sound when I closed it, echoing louder than it should have in the stillness. My laptop sat on the desk, its screen dark. For a second, I hesitated before opening it, half expecting something else to be gone. But when it flickered to life, everything was still there. My files, my drafts, my emails. They hadn't thought of that. A small, bitter sense of relief settled in my chest. My applications might have been reduced to ash, but the work, the ideas, the effort, the proof of what I was capable of, still existed. Hidden in folders they didn't know about. Backed up in places they'd never think to look. I slipped the laptop into my bag carefully, like it was the most valuable thing I owned. Because it was. Before leaving, I paused at the door of my room. For a moment, I let myself look at it one last time. The walls I'd grown up staring at. The desk where I'd spent countless nights studying. The bed where I'd laid awake, imagining a future that felt just out of reach. It didn't feel like mine anymore. Maybe it never really had. The hallway creaked faintly as I stepped out, the sound too loud in the silence. I glanced toward my parents' room. The door was closed. No movement. No voices. They weren't waiting for me. They weren't going to stop me. That realization stung more than I expected. I walked to the front door, my grip tightening slightly around the strap of my bag. For a split second, I hesitated. Not because I was unsure, but because a small, stubborn part of me had hoped someone would call out. Ask where I was going. Tell me to stay. But nothing came. So I opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind me without a sound. The air outside felt different, cooler, sharper, more real. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs, trying to steady the mix of emotions twisting inside me. Fear, anger, relief, freedom. It was still dark when I reached Ayesha's building. The streetlights flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the empty road. My footsteps echoed softly as I climbed the stairs that made something inside me loosen just slightly. I set my bag down near the couch, suddenly aware of how tired I was. You can stay here? She said gently. As long as you need? I nodded, swallowing hard. Thank you. She gave me a small, understanding smile. We'll talk in the morning. And we didn't. Not really. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet adjustments. I took the couch. She gave me space. Sometimes she'd sit beside me, scrolling through her phone or sipping tea, her presence steady and grounding without demanding anything from me. It was exactly what I needed. I found a job within a week, a small bookstore tucked between a pharmacy and a tailor shop. It didn't pay much, but it was enough to start. The owner, an older man with kind eyes, didn't ask too many questions when I said I needed work. You show up on time, you work hard, and we'll be fine, he said. I nodded. I will. And I did. I organized shelves, rang up customers, dusted old books that hadn't been touched in years. There was something oddly comforting about it, the quiet, the routine, the sense of order. In the evenings, I picked up extra hours at a nearby cafe. The work was faster there, louder, filled with the clatter of cups and the hum of conversation. It was exhausting, but it kept me moving. Kept me from thinking too much. But at night, when everything finally slowed down, I couldn't avoid it. That's when I opened my laptop. At first, it felt impossible. The blank screen stared back at me, a reminder of everything that had been lost. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitation creeping in. What if it wasn't enough this time? What if they were right? The thoughts came quietly at first, then louder, more persistent. Each rejection email that landed in my inbox made them stronger. We regret to inform you. We appreciate your interest. Unfortunately, every line felt like confirmation of what my parents had believed all along, that I wasn't worth the investment, that my dreams were unrealistic, that I was asking for too much. Some nights, I almost gave in, almost closed the laptop, almost let the doubt win. But then I'd remember the fire, the way they hadn't even hesitated, the way they'd reduced everything I'd worked for to something disposable. And something inside me would harden again. No, I wasn't going to let that be the end of my story. So I started over, new applications, new essays. I rewrote everything from scratch, pouring more into it this time, not just achievements and plans, but the truth, the struggle, the determination, the refusal to be defined by what had been taken from me. It felt different. Before, I'd been trying to prove something, to them, to the system, to anyone who might be judging. Now I was building something, for me. Weeks passed. Then months. Slowly the rejections became fewer. One acceptance came through late at night, while I was closing up the cafe. I stared at the email, reading it over and over to make sure it was real. Then another followed. And another. None of them were the big, prestigious universities I had once dreamed about. But they were opportunities. Real ones. Doors that hadn't been completely shut. The day I received the final acceptance, with a scholarship that made it financially possible, I sat on the edge of Ayesha's couch, my laptop balanced on my knees, my hands trembling. I read the email once. Then again. Then a third time. And then the tears came, not loud, not overwhelming, just steady, relief, exhaustion, something softer too, something like pride. I had done this, not them. Not anyone else. Me. For a long time, I just sat there letting that realization settle in. They had tried to take my future away. They had believed that without their support, I wouldn't make it. But they were wrong. They hadn't destroyed my future. They had just forced me to build it on my own. And somehow that made it stronger. Because this time, it wasn't something they could take credit for. Or take away. 6 months later, my phone rang at the worst possible time. The cafe was packed. The kind of late afternoon rush where every table was full, orders stacked endlessly, and the air felt thick with noise. Clinking cups, overlapping conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine. I was balancing a tray with 2 lights and a slice of cake, trying to weave through the narrow space without bumping into anyone, when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it at first. Unknown number. It kept ringing. I set the tray down at a table with a quick apology and stepped aside, wiping my hands on my apron before pulling my phone out. For a second, I just stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Something in my chest tightened. I picked up. "Hello," I said, slightly out of breath. There was a brief pause on the other end, then a calm, professional voice. Is this Zara Khan? Yes. This is Mr. Rahman. I'm calling regarding your grandmother. Everything inside me went still. The noise of the cafe faded into something distant, muffled, like I'd suddenly been pulled underwater. My grip on the phone tightened without me realizing it. My grandmother. I repeated, my voice quieter now. Yes. I'm very sorry to inform you. He paused, just long enough for my stomach to drop. She passed away 2 weeks ago. The words didn't register at first. Passed away, 2 weeks ago. No, I said, the denial slipping out automatically, instinctively. No, that's not. I understand this is difficult, he continued gently. And I apologize if this is the first time you're hearing of it. Of course it was. My parents hadn't told me. The realization hit harder than the news itself, layering fresh hurt over something already raw. My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading outward as memories rushed in. Her voice, her quiet laughter, the way she used to call me into her room, just to talk, just to listen. I hadn't been there. I hadn't said goodbye. How, my words stumbled over each other. It was peaceful, he said. She had been unwell for some time, unwell, and no one thought to tell me. I swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as the cafe came back into focus around me, too loud, too bright. Someone called my name from behind the counter, but I couldn't respond. There will be a reading of her will tomorrow, he continued. She left specific instructions that you be contacted directly. Your presence is requested. Requested. The word felt strange, formal, distant, as if I were some outsider being invited into something I should have already been part of. I hesitated, my mind spinning. Going back meant seeing them again. Walking into that house like nothing had changed. Like everything hadn't. But this was about her, not them. I'll be there, I said finally. Thank you. I'll send you the details shortly. The call ended, leaving behind a heavy silence. I stood there for a moment, staring at the blank screen, my reflection faintly visible in it. My eyes looked different, tired maybe. Or just older. Zara. My coworker called again. You okay? I blinked, forcing myself to move. Yeah, I said automatically. Coming. But I wasn't okay, not even close. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. I moved through it on autopilot, taking orders, handing out drinks, nodding when people spoke to me. I didn't remember any faces. Didn't hear any conversations. All I could think about was her. The last time I'd seen my grandmother. She had been sitting by the window in her room, sunlight catching in her silver hair. She'd smiled when I walked in, that warm, knowing smile that always made me feel like I mattered. You look tired, she had said. I'm fine, I'd replied, the usual answer. She hadn't believed me. She never did. Instead, she'd reached out and taken my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. Don't let them make you small, she had said quietly. At the time, I'd brushed it off. Told her she was worrying too much. Now, the memory hit differently. Heavier. More final. When my shift finally ended, I didn't go straight home. I walked instead, letting the cool evening air hit my face, hoping it would clear the fog in my mind. It didn't. By the time I reached Ayesha's apartment, the sky had darkened completely. The lights inside were on, casting a soft glow through the windows. She opened the door before I could knock. You're late, she said, then paused when she saw my face. What happened? I stepped inside slowly, my bag slipping from my shoulder onto the floor. My grandmother, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She passed away. Ayesha's expression softened instantly. Oh, Zara? I shook my head, pressing my lips together as the weight of it all finally started to settle in. They didn't tell me. I added, the words coming out sharper than I intended. It's been 2 weeks. And I just found out from a lawyer. Her brows furrowed. That's messed up. I let out a hollow laugh. Yeah, that sounds about right. She stepped closer, placing a hand gently on my arm. Are you going to go? I hesitated. The answer should have been simple. Of course I should go. It was my grandmother. The only person in that house who had ever truly seen me, who had quietly supported me, even when no one else did. But going back meant facing everything I had walked away from. The house, my parents, Samir, the memories. I have to? I said finally. Shit, she would have wanted me there. Ayesha nodded. Then I'll come with you. I looked at her, surprised. You don't have to do that. I know, she said simply. But I want to. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. Thank you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every memory I had of my grandmother. The small moments. The quiet conversations. The way she used to slip me money for books and tell me not to tell anyone. You'll need knowledge more than anything else, she would say. I swallowed hard, turning onto my side. There were so many things I wished I had said. So many questions I never asked. And now, I never would. The thought settled heavily in my chest, a quiet, aching regret. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, I finally sat up, reaching for my phone. The message from the lawyer was there, the address and time clearly listed. Same house. Same place I had walked away from. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. 6 months. 6 months since I had left everything behind. 6 months of building something new, something separate, something mine. And now, in a single phone call, I was being pulled back. Not because they wanted me, but because she did. I took a deep breath, locking my phone and setting it aside. Whatever waited for me there, whatever uncomfortable conversations, whatever tension, whatever unresolved pain, I would face it. Not for them, for her. And maybe, just maybe, for myself too. The house looked exactly the same. That was the first thing I noticed as the car slowed to a stop outside the gate. The same faded paint on the walls, the same iron gate that creaked when it opened, the same quiet stillness that always seemed to hang over the place like something unspoken. For a moment, I just sat there, my hand resting on the door handle, my chest tight. 6 months, it felt longer. You ready? Ayesha asked gently from the driver's seat. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure that was true. Yeah. The word felt heavier than it should have. I stepped out of the car, the familiar ground beneath my feet, stirring up something I had tried hard to leave behind. The air felt different here, thicker, almost. Like it carried the weight of everything that had happened. Ayesha gave my arm a small, reassuring squeeze before we walked toward the door together. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. The door opened before my hand could reach it, and there she was, my mother. She looked the same too, composed, controlled. Not a single strand of hair out of place. For a brief second our eyes met. There was no warmth there, no apology. Just a flicker of something unreadable before her expression settled back into its usual calm. You're here, she said. Not I'm glad you came. Not I'm sorry. Just an observation. Yes, I replied, my voice steady. She glanced briefly at Ayesha, then stepped aside to let us in without another word. The living room felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just outgrown it. My father was already seated, his posture straight, his face set in that familiar stern expression. Samir sat beside him, his hands clasped tightly together, his eyes flicking up the moment I entered. He looked different, not physically, but there was something in his expression. Unease maybe, or guilt. No one stood up. No one came forward. Sit, my father said, gesturing toward an empty chair across from them. I sat. Ayesha took the seat beside me, her presence quiet but grounding. The lawyer was already there, seated near the center table, a thick folder resting neatly in front of him. He looked up as we settled in, offering a small, polite nod. Miss Zara Khan, he said. Thank you for coming. I nodded in return, my hands resting in my lap, fingers laced together to keep them from trembling. We'll begin now, he said, opening the folder. The room fell into a heavy silence. He started reading, his voice calm and measured, each word deliberate. To my son and his wife, he began, I leave the family home, along with the savings held in our joint accounts. My mother's posture relaxed slightly, as if this was exactly what she had expected. My father gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Of course. This was what they thought mattered. The house. The money. The security. I barely listened as he continued listing assets, investments, accounts, belongings, all carefully divided in ways that felt predictable. Then he paused. Just for a second. And to my granddaughter Zara. The shift in the room was immediate. My heartbeat quickened, a sudden, sharp rhythm in my chest. I felt Ayesha's glance beside me, but I kept my eyes fixed on the lawyer. I leave my private investment portfolio, her education fund, and all personal assets held solely in my name. Silence. Not the quiet kind. The heavy, stunned kind that presses down on everything. What? My mother's voice cut through it, sharp and disbelieving. That's not, there must be some mistake. There is no mistake. The lawyer replied calmly, not even looking up from the document. My father leaned forward slightly, his jaw tightening. Explain that. The terms are clearly outlined here. The lawyer said, tapping the page lightly. Everything was arranged personally by your mother before her passing. That's impossible. My mother insisted, her voice rising. She wouldn't, she couldn't have? She did. He interrupted gently but firmly. Samir's gaze shifted to me, his eyes wide, searching for something, an answer maybe. Or reassurance. I had none to give. Because I was just as shocked as they were. The lawyer reached into the folder again and pulled out a sealed envelope. She also left a letter, he said, turning toward me. Specifically for you. My hands hesitated for a moment before reaching out. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. I recognized the handwriting immediately, neat, slightly slanted, unmistakably hers. My chest tightened as I carefully opened it, unfolding the paper inside. The room faded. The tension, the stares, the unspoken accusations, all of it disappeared as my eyes moved across the page. They will try to make you feel small. My throat closed. They will try to convince you that your dreams are less important. I have watched it happen for years. Even when I wished I could stop it sooner. My vision blurred, the words swimming slightly as tears gathered in my eyes. I saw the way you worked. The way you pushed yourself, even when no one was cheering for you. A tear slipped down before I could stop it. So I made sure they couldn't take this from you too. My grip on the letter tightened. This is not a gift, Zara. It is something you have already earned. I swallowed hard, my chest rising and falling unevenly. You were never the weak one. You were simply surrounded by people who could not recognize your strength. The words hit deeper than anything else. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. I folded the letter slowly, my hands trembling just slightly, and looked up. The room came rushing back. My mother was staring at me, her expression no longer calm. There was something else there now, anger, disbelief, something sharper. This is ridiculous, she said. She was old. She didn't understand what she was doing. Someone must have influenced her. No, I said quietly. The word cut through her sentence. All eyes turned to me. I met her gaze, steady this time. She knew exactly what she was doing. My father's expression darkened. Watch your tone. I held his gaze without flinching. Why? Because it doesn't match what you expected. This is still our family, he said, his voice cold. You don't get to come in here after disappearing for months and act like... Like what? I interrupted, my voice still calm, but firmer now. Like I matter. The words hung in the air sharp, unavoidable. Samir looked down, his shoulders tensing. My mother let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Don't twist this. We did what was best for everyone. For everyone, I repeated. My mind flashed back to the fire, the smoke, the ashes. Yes, she said firmly. You were being unrealistic. We had to make a practical choice. I nodded slowly. I remember, I said. Silence stretched between us. Then I stood. The movement was small, but it shifted something in the room immediately. I didn't come here to argue, I said. I came because of her. I glanced down at the letter in my hand. She believed in me, I added, my voice softer now, but no less certain. It wasn't a question. It wasn't something I needed them to agree with. It was simply the truth. And for the first time, they didn't have anything to say back. I didn't stay long after that. There was nothing left in that house for me, not grief I could share, not words that would heal anything. Not even anger strong enough to keep me there. Just a quiet understanding that whatever had tied me to that place had already been broken long before I walked back in. Aisha stood as I did, her presence steady at my side as we moved toward the door. No one tried to stop me this time either. My mother didn't call out. My father didn't offer a final word. Samir shifted in his seat like he wanted to say something, but whatever it was, it stayed locked behind his silence. The door closed behind me with a soft click. And that was it. Outside, the air felt lighter. Not because anything had been fixed, but because I no longer felt like I was carrying it all with me. We walked back to the car in silence. I didn't realize how tightly I had been holding the letter until I finally looked down at it. The paper slightly crumpled in my grip. Aisha glanced over as she unlocked the car. "You okay?" I let out a slow breath as I slid into the seat. "I think so." And for once, I meant it. Not perfectly okay. Not completely healed. But steady. The kind of steady that comes after something shifts into place inside you. We drove away without looking back. The inheritance didn't feel real at first. Numbers on paper. Accounts I had never known existed. Words like portfolio and assets that felt too distant from the life I had been living just weeks ago, juggling shifts and counting every expense. But slowly, reality settled in. This wasn't just money. It was freedom. The kind I had been fighting for without even realizing it had been within reach all along. I met with the lawyer again a few days later, this time in his office. He explained everything carefully, how my grandmother had planned it, how long she had been preparing, how intentional every decision had been. "She wanted to ensure your independence," he said. Independence. The word felt different now, stronger. I nodded, absorbing every detail, every explanation. There was a strange comfort in knowing that none of this had been impulsive. That my grandmother had seen what was happening long before I had fully like stepping into a version of my life I had almost lost. Except this time, it wasn't almost. It was real. I found a small apartment not far from campus. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every small decoration, every decision about how the space looked and felt, it was all mine. No one to question it. No one to take it away. There was a quiet kind of joy in that. Not loud or overwhelming, but steady. Consistent. The kind that builds slowly, day by day. I threw myself into my studies, but it didn't feel like pressure anymore. It felt like purpose. Like I was finally moving toward something instead of constantly trying to prove I deserved to. People noticed me here, not as someone who was too much or too ambitious, but as someone capable, driven, equal. It was strange at first, being seen like that. It took time to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to tell me I didn't belong. But it never came. And slowly, I started to believe it myself. Samir reached out a few weeks after the reading. His message was simple. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it. To leave that entire chapter of my life behind without looking back. But another part, the part that had grown, that had learned to face things instead of avoiding them, knew I couldn't do that completely. So I replied. "Okay." We met at a small cafe near campus. He looked different up close. Tired, maybe. Or just less certain of himself than I had ever seen him before. "Hey," he said awkwardly as I sat down across from him. "Hey." There was a brief silence, both of us unsure where to start. "I didn't know," he said finally. "About what they did. Not like that?" I held his gaze. "You were there?" He flinched slightly. "Yeah. But I thought I don't know. I didn't think they'd actually go through with it." I didn't respond right away. Because the truth was, it didn't really matter what he had thought. He hadn't stopped them. "I'm not here to fight," he added quickly. I wanted to say I'm sorry." The words hung between us. I believed him. But belief didn't erase what had happened. "I appreciate that," I said after a moment. He nodded, looking down at his hands. "Things aren't great at home." I almost smiled at the understatement. I figured. They keep talking about the will. About how unfair it is. Of course they did. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch for a moment. "I hope you figure things out," I said finally. He looked up, a hint of something in his eyes, relief, maybe, or gratitude. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." We didn't talk much longer after that. There wasn't anything else that needed to be said. And for the first time, that felt okay. Months passed. Life settled into something new, something steady. Standing on campus one afternoon, watching students move around me, laughing, talking, living their lives without the weight I had once carried, I felt it fully for the first time. Peace. Not because everything had been resolved, not because the past had been erased, but because it no longer controlled me. The fire had taken everything I thought I needed. It had reduced my plans, my expectations, my sense of security to nothing. But it had also burned away something else. Fear, dependence. The need to be chosen by people who had already decided I wasn't enough. I looked up at the sky, the sunlight warm against my face, and let out a slow breath. They had underestimated me. They had believed that taking away my future would make me smaller, easier to control, easier to fit into the life they had planned for me. Instead, they had forced me to build something stronger, something entirely my own. And that was their biggest mistake. Because the moment you stop waiting for someone else to see your worth is the moment you realize it was yours all along. And once you know that, there's no going back.